All right, so for your first Edpuzzle video, we're going to go over basics before we actually get into the math lesson. So what should be on your paper? You should have a piece of paper out in front of you. You should have a pencil with you. And at the top, you're just going to want to always label it. That way you can always flip through, find that page easily. So you're going to put your name at the top. Then afterwards, you're going to put the subject, Math 8, your period, what day it is, and then since we're doing an Edpuzzle activity right now, you're going to say Edpuzzle and then that lesson title. So this lesson was integers. And then throughout this video, I'm going to be doing lessons on the screen, and you're going to have to be actually writing those examples down. So don't just watch the video and have nothing on your paper. Be going through them like we would be when we're just doing notes in class. You want to include all of the actual Edpuzzle questions that you're typing in for your own answers also on your paper. And then make sure that you just keep this paper handy somewhere, because you can be asked to submit a picture of your Edpuzzle work at any time. So that first lesson we already talked about, we're going to be working with integers, and we're going to be adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. You have your learning targets on the screen, and that first part of it says I can perform operations with integers. We're going to talk about those vocab words. So first thing you see that may confuse you a little bit is operations. And operations is just what we were talking about on that last slide. It's the adding, the subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. And you're going to be doing that with integers. So when you're talking about integers, you're including all the negative numbers that are whole numbers, you're including 0, and you're including all your positive whole numbers. So you can see some examples there and how there's the ... going from the left to the right. So you could go as far negative as you'd like and as far positive as you'd like. So you're going to be working with these numbers, adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing today. I know I have it when I can complete the assignment without a calculator, and I'm learning this because these operations will help me complete math problems with ease. So first rules that we're going to remind ourselves with, this is just a review lesson, so something should ring a bell from the last few years of math, is when you're working with the same sign and you're adding and subtracting, you're going to keep that sign. So if both your numbers are positive, your answer is going to stay positive. If both your numbers are negative, your answer is going to stay negative, and you're going to add those two numbers together. So same side, same sign, keep the sign, and add the numbers. So 3 plus 14, we've known that one for many, many years, is 17. Next example is when we have the two negative numbers, we're going to, since they're both negative, we're going to keep that sign in our answer. And then you're going to add just the absolute value, the positive values of 2 and 11 to give myself 13. So negative 2 and taking 11 more away ends up being negative 13. And you can think about these kinds of problems as money. If you have $3 and you get 14 more dollars, you're obviously going to have even more money. If you owe $2 and then you owe 11 more dollars, you're going to be in debt in an even more negative amount. And now this is the example that you're going to do on your own. So in a second, the screen is going to pause and you'll be able to type your answer into Edpuzzle. Remember to actually keep writing all your work down on a piece of paper. For this problem, same sign, they're both negative, so it's going to stay negative, and then you're adding 11 and 15 together to get 26, and you end up with negative 26 as your final answer. Our next rule is when you're working with different signs and you're adding and subtracting. The rule when you're working with different signs is you're going to keep the sign of the bigger number when you're taking their absolute values. So you're keeping the sign of the bigger number, and then you're going to subtract your two numbers. So when you see the plus and minus, I made the plus sign really big to represent that the positive one is bigger. So when the positive is bigger, your answer is positive. And then in this next row, you have a positive and a negative, and the negative is way bigger. So when the negative number is bigger, your answer is going to stay negative. So looking at this top row, I have 9 plus -1. Just looking at the absolute value, so 9 and 1, which number is bigger? And that's this 9. Since 9 is positive, my answer is going to stay positive. And then I just subtract my two numbers. 9 minus 1 gives me 8. In the second example, you're looking at 8 and 20, the absolute values, so you're not worrying about this negative sign yet. 20 is the bigger number, and since it's negative, that means your answer is going to be negative. And then you're going to subtract your two numbers, so 20 minus 8 gives me 12. And you can think about these examples as money as well. So if you have $9 and you owe someone $1, you're going to end up with only $8. If you have $8 and you owe someone $20, you're going to end up in debt with only $12 in debt. Another example for you to do on your own, go ahead and complete -4 plus 10. You should have ended up with the answer of this one being the 10 is the bigger number and it's positive, so your final answer is positive. 10 minus 4 gives me 6. Another problem for you to do on your own, 13 plus -19. The 19 is bigger and it's negative, so your final answer is going to be negative. And then subtract 19 minus 13 ends up leaving you with 6. So -6 is your final answer. Our last rule is when we're working with double negatives with addition and subtraction before we move on to multiplication and division. Whenever you see two negative signs right next to each other, you're going to be able to make them a positive because you're flipping the signs. So for example, if you have -29 minus a -3, you can make that into addition. Now we have different signs here. So I'm going to keep the sign of the bigger number, the negative, and I'm going to subtract 29 minus 3 leaves me with 26. Another example for you to do on your own. You should have turned these both into positives. We have different signs again, so keep the sign of the bigger number, +6. 6 minus 5 leaves me a +1. And then finally, we're on to multiplication and division. So whenever we're doing same sign with multiplication and division, your answer is always going to be positive. So if you're multiplying two positive numbers, it's going to stay positive. If you are dividing two negative numbers or multiplying two negative numbers, your answer is going to stay positive. So this first example, we have 4 times 5. There's only parentheses, no symbol in between, which reminds me there's an imaginary multiplication sign in the middle, leaves me with +20. And then -12 divided by -2, double negatives, +6. Go ahead and complete -7 times -7. You should have gotten +49. And then our last rule is when we're doing multiplication and division and they're different signs. So one's positive, one's negative. Since they're different signs, there's an odd number of negatives. Your final answer is going to be negative. So -1 times 108 leaves me at -108. Go ahead and complete -28 divided by 4. Only one negative should have left you with a -7. And your final 5 examples to complete on your own. go ahead and just type them in. Type your final answers. You don't have to type the actual problem itself as your answer. Only put what you would put in these boxes. And for your final answers, negative 15 plus 7, that's going to stay negative. 15 minus 7 gives me 8. I see the double negative right here, so it turns into two addition problems. Negative 75 plus 75 takes me back to 0. C, they're connected with parentheses, so it's really multiplication. There's only one negative, so it stays negative. 48. D, they're both negative, so my final answer stays negative, and I add my two numbers together. 9 plus 13 gives me 22. My final answer, 6 is bigger, so my answer stays positive. 6 minus 3 gives me 3.